was president between 1989 and 1990. He has been awarded Padma Vibhushan in 2001. His studies on Bronsted-based catalysis in CO2 hydration and subsequently kinetics of COS absorption in aqueous amines and alkanolamines brought out linear free energy relationship between CO2 and COS absorption in solutions of amines and alkanolamines. He has contributed extensively on the role of microphases in multiple reactions, which he pioneered, in fact. He is an advisor to industries worldwide, and he has advised policy-making bodies in India on education, science and technology, and industrial development. We are very fortunate to have him in this session, and topic of his today's lecture is the critical role of innovations to trigger rapid economic growth. So, Professor Sharma, kindly.
Before going into this, I think we should request all of the participants to mute their microphones so that we can hear Professor Sharma clearly.
Ma'am President Zaha, Vice President Devang Khakkar, Chairman Gautam Biswas, Fellows of INSA, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I should like to compliment INSA for organizing an extraordinary program, even though it is in virtual mode. And I do recall my long association of 45 years with INSA, which I'm cherishing and will cherish for the rest of my life. I'm going to talk to you about this crucial role of innovations. And in this contemporary time, I am in a very good position to talk about, and I'll continue to refer to the role of fundamental research, the blue sky research. And I first talk about how vaccines have made an extraordinary difference for all-inclusive growth. It wasn't long ago, few years ago, it was unthinkable that you would be able to come out with the vaccine in less than 5 years. It is the advances in basic sciences, which I prefer to call blue sky research, that it has enabled us to come out with the vaccines in less than a year. And we are all beneficiary of these innovations. How hard it must have been to come out with the original vaccines, and how the globe saw eradication of smallpox, polio, and many other diseases associated with children. Similarly, how inventions leading to inventions, any new idea that works. And when this idea is converted into something commercial, profitable, it is innovation. Some of this word is innovation is used very loosely in India. So I want to make a clear distinction between invention, which is based on fundamental research, and how this invention is converted into innovation, that is a profit-making or a very useful activity for society. And from this, I go to what has been a wonder achievement in India of 1.2 billion mobile phones. This is an extraordinary example, apart from vaccine, of all-inclusive growth. Many of us in our early years had hard time getting a landline. Today, nobody's bothered about it. Everybody in the society, but how high science is involved in this mobile phone, quite apart from the space program, satellites. Every component in mobile phone is a product of fundamental research. You would recall the work on LED came through curiosity. And this curiosity led to such extraordinary use. And we always say, we technologists, that no technology is ever mature. You can look forward to further researches in coming out with LED to cover a whole range of colors. Similarly, if you take the original studies on NMR, which was obviously based on very fundamental research, 5 Nobel Prizes have gone in this area. And society at large benefits because everybody in the street knows there's a thing called MRI. You can see for yourself how fundamental research leads to such extraordinary innovations to help everyone in the society. Similarly, lasers. How lasers were invented? Did they imagine at that time that lasers will be used in the backyard by people who have had very limited education to cut diamonds? You will find number of places in North Gujarat, Rajasthan, where lasers are used for cutting diamonds, which was otherwise a very cumbersome process. In terms of the benefit bestowed on the society, the invention of the pill by Dejasi has been, in my judgment, one of the greatest contribution of basic research, because family planning happened as a reality. And recent reports in India show that India will be soon stabilizing its population, and maybe there may be a decrease in our population in coming years. I'll then refer to some very simple things associated with the industry with which I've had the lifetime association, that how the growth of acrylics, which in turn also saw technological breakthroughs in making acrylic acid, and how polyacrylic acid and many other components go for the health, the use of all these materials in diapers and sanitary towels. Imagine how health in juggies, in slums, where the need for diaper and sanitary towel is much more, and how fundamental work in polymerization of these acrylic acid, acrylic esters has made such a good difference. Similarly, many times people talk about mathematics, queen and companion of science, as our great person from Bangalore used to say. Now see how mathematics is so very helpful. INSA had organized seminars on mathematics, basic mathematics, fundamental, and how today artificial intelligence is so greatly dependent upon high-class mathematics. Similarly, the ancient studies in India of astronomy, Indians had an uncanny knack of astronomy. And you can read a lot about astronomers, and some of the noble people were also involved in the studies in astronomy. And how astronomy today benefits all of us through its use in weather forecasting. The main thing I'm trying to stress is, it is the basic research which leads to invention, and without invention, innovations don't take place, and therefore the society doesn't benefit. On the entertainment side, you would recall how radios with valves were the order of the day. Then came tape recorders and the market for tapes. The purpose of mentioning this is that there will be new innovation which can completely supplant what was the prevalent thing in the past. Today, you don't talk of the tape recorders at all. I was associated with the plant to make the tapes. And by the time the plant was put up, tapes were out of business. So there is no reference now to, to tape recorders, audio tapes and all. People then now today we have YouTubes and whatnot. So you have to realize, similarly, patience is a mandatory requirement for inventions to take place. I like to quote one of the greatest development ever in the history of chemical industry, and it was Haber-Bosch process for making ammonia. Haber, who was a physical chemist, had the patience to test 5,000 catalysts. Imagine, 5,000 catalysts. But he hit upon a catalyst which is still order of the day, although some modifications have been made and people are struggling very hard. Now, this is now more than almost a century old. And how the birth of ammonia, although originally meant to make nitric acid for explosives, both for civilian use and for wars, that without ammonia, we wouldn't have had fertilizer. And without that, we wouldn't have had the food sufficiency. Breakthroughs in agriculture, whether hybridization or through tissue culture, also came out of fundamental research. Now, what are the problems that one faces in innovations? When you come out with a new idea, you face a lot of controversies. Most people say, oh, what is this? You're talking something nonsense, And it becomes a humiliating experience for the innovator. But the innovators are also, real good innovators are also tough people. They are willing to accept failures. So I want to emphasize that failures are an integral part of experimentation. And failures are the harbingers of success. Unfortunately, in the Indian society, we do not have the culture of owning failures. And this is one of the reasons why somehow, even though we have all the talent, and a lot of our talent gets expressed in the Silicon Valley, that we are not able to come out with as many innovations as we are quite capable of doing, because failures are not owned. I'll give you a very simple, trivial example of an everyday item. That is the PET bottle. PET bottle, Wyatt in DuPont company had 10,000 failures before he came out with a recipe to make the PET bottle. Now, today we have something like 60 billion bottles per annum being made. PET itself was a major innovation, because the entire apparel industry, look at saris, even the poorest lady in India can wear a very good sari, can manage even with one or two saris, it never fizzles out. It requires very little water to clean. So, many of these things have come through discovery, but some have also come through market driven. And I give the example of one of real development in the history that was Cucaruthas Nylon 66. It opened new frontier for synthetic fiber. And simultaneously polyester fiber came. Imagine what would have been the condition of a poor lady buying a sari. Cotton sari is expensive to maintain, doesn't last long. Whereas polyester sari, you can have all types of brilliant colors. It never wears out, so to say, till you get tired of wearing that sari and then probably throw and use it for some packaging or something. So all these business of discovery-driven part, now you can imagine how difficult it will be for the owners of establishment. So what I say is, usually there is this big dichotomy between the inventor and the management. Management wants to believe in certainty, whereas there is a high uncertainty in new developments that you undertake. And it is here where the enlightened management can make a difference. And DuPont was an excellent example of giving Caruthers a free hand, where you come out with something original. Don't worry about its application. We know how to make applications. The same nylon which I mentioned to you earlier, although it was a discovery-driven product based on very good polymer science, excellent polymer science, the same thing saw market-driven innovation, and that was the aromatic fibers. You remember how bulletproof chest was made. So the aromatic polyesters made a big difference, how it goes in composites today, how lightweight materials can be made. But this came through market-driven. It was not through the original invention. Original invention was making nylon 6,6 through condensation of adipic acid and hexamethylene diamine. So now I want to go back to a very nice anecdote to emphasize how in the beginning fundamental research meets with some cynicism. And I quote to you Michael Faraday's demonstration of electricity to the Chancellor of Exchequer, what is equivalent of finance minister in India. After watching that experiment, he asked Michael Faraday what good it is. And his response was very simple. He said, "My lord, before long you will tax it." So you can see the kind of cynicism that comes when you come out. Being associated with the industry for more than 50 years, I tell you, this dichotomy between what management wants. Management wants certainty. Now, how do you guarantee a certainty? Research is not all that in structured activity.
Hello.
Sometimes like a random walk.
হ্যাঁ আমি
Blind valley.
অন্যটাতে ডিস্টার্ব
The valley is blind. I think somebody is not putting this thing on mute. It's coming. So I had a little break in middle that. So this whole concept of dichotomy between the management, I said management wants certainty. Now research is not all that structured activity. You know, I sometimes liken it to a random walk in a blind valley to find out whether it is really blind. If somebody pretends that he knows the result of his experiment, that means either he is just repeating some experiment or he is talking nonsense. You will find history of many Nobel Prizes where they said that they found an unusual observation. And I will refer to the role of serendipity, how serendipity has made such a great impact on innovations. But serendipity never occurred to uninitiated persons. Whether it was the discovery of penicillin, and many items in daily life that you see were serendipitous. Cellulose nitrate, low density polyethylene, high density polyethylene, Teflon, which is on the tips of journalists because when they want to describe any politician, he is slippery like Teflon. Even in medical field, anesthesia, number of things, even insulin, they were serendipitous treatment. So serendipity has always played a very, very big role. And I repeat, it has never occurred to persons who are not initiated. You can't just sit and say, oh, one day I will get this great new idea. So why work so hard? You will get it. Now, these days, there's a lot of reference to the role of renewable energy. I want to explain to you how this renewable energy is so critically dependent upon inventions leading to innovations. You all know the history, how long ago the solar panels were talked about. Why it is in last 3-4 years, there has been a major breakthrough. We talked about 20 crores per megawatt, 15 crores per megawatt, 10 crores. We are now talking of under 5. In fact, now we are talking of less investment per megawatt than in a coal-based plant, quite independent of CO2 emissions. You can see for yourself how everything in the solar power is dependent upon hardcore basic science, which led to all the components, whether it is solar, kind of high-class polymers like polyvinyl fluoride, Tedlar film that is used. Similarly, dyes which are used in solar systems and all. But you take every other part of renewable energy. Let us take the renewable energy based on wind power. The wind power depends critically upon powerful magnets, neodymium-based magnets. And when this research in magnetism was done, people did not realize the high-class application of the studies in magnetism. If you have wings which are longer and longer, the power generation takes a big jump. Today, we are able to go up to 60 meters, 80 meters round a corner. But imagine if we are going to go to 100, 150. What will it depend upon? It will depend upon very, very, very advanced breakthroughs in material science. That you will be able to have a 100 meter, 120 meter, which will depend upon innovations in the composites. And you can realize for yourself what is required as a background in this kind of thing. I also want to refer to how catalysis has played a vital role in doing extraordinary innovations. Sometimes the new catalytic systems overthrew the previous whole acetylene chemistry, which was called rapid chemistry, got completely replaced by ethylene-based product to a great extent. This kind of breakthrough, sometimes, you don't believe that such kind of transformation can take place. Imagine methanol going to aromatics, methanol going to olefins, or carbon monoxide plus hydrogen going to whole varieties of product, methane, diesel, olefins, alcohol. And you look at the number of Nobel Prizes that have gone in the area of catalysis, I think it may be more than 11 now, or even more. So catalysis has always played a very, very big role in coming out with very, very innovative processes. So this is yet another example. Now, having been a university man all my life, and today making a living consulting with industry, I want to emphasize that there is a great trait in a university system. And there is a normal saying, the homogeneity of an individual is far more important to come out with inventions than in a heterogeneous group. But it requires crazy individuals who are driven by the spirit of coming out with something original, and they will not take no for anything. Now, how to cultivate such persons in organization? Academia is a right kind of a place where people with unusual habits, commitments can make a dent. You will find even some of the major breakthroughs in the drugs have come through smaller companies, but the large companies were important to commercialize them. Whether you talk about Viagra, whether you talk about many other drugs, even this hepatitis C breakthrough, which went to $16 billion per annum drug, it came from pharmaceuticals. An individual who was driven by this desire to come out with a new drug Today you are seeing how new drugs are being invented, and you look at the complexity of the chemistry that is being employed, whether it is molnupiravir or the new Pfizer thing. If we have a pill for COVID, what a big difference it will make that you will have a treatment. Now, these are based on inventive minds. But the cost of converting invention into innovation should not be understated. That is why there's a role of an inventor and there's a role of large organization to convert that into something of commercial practice. Lastly, let me refer to how enzymatic processes will make a world of difference. And I quote Francis Arnold, the Nobel laureate, that how directed evolution will do something better than nature. Many of you may be knowing that there is a semi-commercial unit for fermentation to make vanillin. There are many other products like isoprene being made by fermentation. If nature can make rubber, polyisoprene at ambient condition, surely we can draw some clue. Similarly, if a silkworm can directly give you a fiber, and we have none of this that you have a monomer going directly to a fiber, nature teaches us. But the directed evolution will allow many transformations, particularly the optically active molecules, which are essential because when you take the optically active isomer, you don't have the ballast of the racemic material. And FDA insists that whenever for drugs, there is a racemic compound, you must give the efficacy of the constituent isomer. Even in agro, it is now becoming more and more necessary whenever molecule is racemic to only introduce the optically active. Dear fellows and the attendees, I've tried to give you glimpses of how economic growth, but let me also quote a Nobel laureate, Robert Solow, who said minimum 50% economic growth in developed country comes out of technological innovations. In developing country, it is much more. And I also quote to you in the end how China for the next few years has planned for itself that at least 60% of the growth should come through innovations. So innovations dependent on inventions are absolutely essential for rapid economic growth. And we must have ingredients to see that inventors are supported, and there should be no bar, and it should be strictly on merit that inventors are supported. Thank you very much. I enjoyed my participation and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Professor Sharma. Thank you very much.
Many thanks.
Thank you, sir. So nice to see you.
So we are really fortunate to have Professor Sharma for this to deliver this anniversary lecture of INSA. Now I may formally request President Professor Saha and Vice President Professor Khakkar to make some comments, and maybe few of our viewers, Professor Brahmachari, I can appreciate, and few others, if they want to interact, maybe we can have a very quick interaction for a few minutes.
Yeah, Professor Sharma, thank you so much for a wonderful lecture, which I really enjoyed. But I'm sure that in the audience, we have some members who would be keen to ask questions. So I would request if we can, I would request Professor Biswas, if he can initiate the questioning after Professor Khakkar has spoken. Thank you. And congratulations to you, Professor Sharma.
Thank you, Professor Sharma. As usual, it was a wonderful talk and very inspiring. I think that your emphasis on basic research being the foundation of inventions and innovations, I think, is the key message that I got. And I think this is something that we need to do in a big way over here.
I think INSA should really propagate this idea that unless Government of India supports blue sky research, there is no chance of invention, therefore there is no chance of real innovations, and not all those street things about innovations. Everybody is talking of innovations so lightly, you know.
Right.
Right, right, very right.
So,
Very right.
you know, at one level, I see a lot of support for young people to do startups and so forth. But what I'm seeing more and more is that there is a missing pipeline of ideas and inventions to feed this enthusiasm to start new businesses and try and address the challenges of society. So I think your message is most appropriate. So thank you, Professor Sharma, for a great lecture. And now I think we can have questions from the audience. Professor Brahmachari, if you'd like to mention anything, please go ahead.
Sir, tell me why. I think we have the screenshot. Somebody has put up the next talk screen, so you cannot see anybody's face. If we download,
Go ahead, come in. Go ahead.
That question comes again and again in my mind, that how do you encourage as an academy people who take risk and those who actually is rewarded for grand ideas, even if it fails? Because all our awards, recognitions go only basis on success. But we have no measurement metrics by which we say this was a grand idea, which didn't work, but doesn't matter. We recognize. You know, I understand industries do it. And how do you think that an academy can encourage and recognize people? Because we often look at the list of fellows of the academy. We do not have people in this list of fellows of the academy who have taken risk and done something fantastic, become unicorns. And what can we do as academic fellow?
Well, as I mentioned, cultural habits have to change. And unless I repeat, unless we have recognition for failures, there is no chance of inventions to come. If you track the history of inventions throughout the world, you will see that there has been a sheer lack of support for failures. I just gave you a simple example of ET bottles, but I have innumerable examples from literature to show how many new ideas were poo-pooed. Now, having been connected with corporate world, it bothers you when you talk of something very original. The first question the managing director or the owner will ask, has it been done by anybody else? And that I get very irritated and I tell them, how is relevant? That is relevant. Why don't you comment on what I said? I'm pretty, I don't care because I can live without consultancy, so I don't care. So I tell the person on their face, why don't you comment, or any one of you comment on the idea that I have shared and say that this idea is no good for this reason, rather than saying, has anybody else done it? Are we second-hand or third-hand people or what?
That is why we do Ola after Uber, we do Flipkart after Amazon. And I don't know whether academy should come up with some recognition system and include into the academy those who have done extraordinary jobs in industry. I think one of the weakness of our academies, it lacks those brilliant people who actually made a difference. And I think it would be a good idea, inspired by your talk, how to include that to the president, to take it up in your council meeting, that create a section, new sectional committee, which actually looks at great innovators, and they may not have scholarly publication, but they have done extraordinary innovative work.
See, fact that you are able to publish good papers in high impact factor journals doesn't mean you have come out with something original.
Absolutely.
I quote a very famous statement made by Royal Society President. It's not important where you publish, but what you publish. And it is here we need this kind of people at the top. If you have a hierarchical system, it is antidote for doing anything inventive. We need to unshackle, encourage the young people. See, once they would accomplish something, they can be more daring in doing something. I would suggest that people, let's say somebody who's got Bhatnagar Prize, or somebody who's been recognized as young scientist, challenge them now. Don't bother about publications and all. Come out with something as a breakthrough work. Whether it is in separation. See, for example, I tried very hard to get group of people to do what Francis Arnold has been saying. We have a sheer lack of competence in that area in India. We have not come out with a single important biotransformation. It's a very big area. It's not that there is lack of funding from Department of Biotechnology. Department of Biotechnology has been very generous in funding. DST has been very generous in funding. They brought about a big change in funding system in India. Although it all started with UGC's the courses program and then special assistant program, but the kind of funding that is available from DST and DBT is in a different class. If DST can give projects up to 12 crores, is money an impediment? I would say that today funding is so good in India, then people need to be challenged to come out with ideas.
Thank you, sir. We can have maybe one or two quick questions. Professor Shankar Pal, and then Professor Dikshit. Professor Pal, do you have?
Because I actually always enjoy his actually talk. So and actually those issues Professor Brahmachari mentioned, these are all our everyday issue. We talk about impact factor, we talk about this, because actually those factors and those numbers, numerals, that actually help us to just make a decision, and then also to just get rid of our responsibilities. That's what we have been doing in our just Bhatnagar Prize Committee, FNA, everything. But now this year I have seen from Indian Academy of Science that they made a just good movement. That
in front of you where.
Sorry. So actually, my suggestion is that in our INSA or anything, let us not consider those statistics of all awards and publication impact factor, H index particularly. Yeah, because H index has become a very maligning factor nowadays. Everybody knows the parameter, and we Indians, particularly Chinese, they are very good in maligning those factors. So I am not in just favor of going by all H index and this impact factor always. But this is a game going on for the last decade. I've been seeing all good journals. They are trying to improve impact factor. So it will be good that when we consider that one's achievement, let us ignore those statistics. How many awards he has received before, how many papers he has published, what is the H index and so on. But again, it is easy to comment, but it's just difficult to implement also always.
Thank you, Professor Pal. If there is any other question, Professor Dikshit?
Yeah, I did. I really thoroughly enjoyed your talk, Professor Sharma, and it is always a pleasure to listen to you. And it is very, very inspiring. I was also thinking that there is a requirement that Indian scientists actually collaborate very extensively with outside country. But that will also, because this is the time where people are working in large teams. However, because we are also interested, or rather our scientists are also interested in recognitions, getting awards, and somehow there is a feeling that if you are singularly participating or contributing to it, you will have more recognitions. So in India, I see that there is less team effort than it should be. And our international collaborations are also less in number. So this is where I think we need to think. This is what I want to comment on. I don't know whether this can be discussed at length because of the paucity of time.
Chandrima, I want to use this opportunity with Dr. Sharma around.
Yes.
Why not you, INSA, recognize Krishna Ella for Covaxin development in India and give a fellowship? Create it, create something new. If you only when recognize, you realize that Biocon chairman Kiran Majumdar is not a fellow of the National Academy. Where are we accepting innovations? Ratan Tata is not a fellow of the Academy. Narayan Murthy is not a fellow of the Academy. So unless you create a new window and recognize, and this is a great opportunity for you in this year to say, we recognize a scientist, entrepreneur to start with. And Professor Sharma's talk would be used as a minutes of your meeting in the council to propose this. Covaxin is an amazing action. It's a real example. Similarly, we are getting other things. So my suggestion is, when I listened to Raghavan Varadarajan yesterday, I was feeling very proud that he is converting his science into actual applications and going ahead with startup companies. So we have capabilities. I will request you as a president, take the opportunity of Dr. M.M. Sharma's lecture recommendation and do something. Because we only talk, but we should do something. You agree with me, Paul?
Yusuf Hamid is Royal Society Fellow.
So, should you, I mean, are there any more questions?
Professor Khakkar, Professor Khakkar, you may comment on our new category of fellows where you are a member of that.
Yeah. So this is certainly very much along the lines of what Professor Brahmachari was saying, that we are actually recognizing those who have worked in national missions and in technology development. And we are considering them as fellows. And his suggestion is certainly very good, that someone like Krishna Ella could be a very prime candidate for such a recognition. So I think that that committee can certainly look into it, and I'm a member of that committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Khakkar.
Thank you. Great initiative.
So, if there is no other question, once again, we can express our profound gratitude to one of the greatest scholars of India, Professor M.M. Sharma, for his excellent lecture. And we hope to listen to his lectures, once again and again. Professor Sharma, I mean, please accept our gratitude and thanks.
I'm part of the system.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Sharma.
So today's afternoon, our next lecture is from Professor Yegnanarayana, who is a very prolific scientist in the area of image processing, speech processing, signal processing, and neural networks. I would like to again give a brief introduction, even though Professor Yegnanarayana doesn't need a formal introduction. He is currently INSA senior scientist at IIIT Hyderabad. He was Professor Emeritus at BITS Pilani Hyderabad campus during 2016. He was also the Institute Professor and Microsoft Chair at IIIT Hyderabad between 2012 and 2016. He was professor and head of the Department of Computer Science for a long duration at IIT Madras from 1980 to 2006. He has visited Carnegie Mellon University between 1977 and 1980, and also at the beginning of his career, he was a faculty member at the Indian Institute of Science between 1966 and 1978. His research interests, as I have already mentioned, he is extremely well known in the areas of signal processing, speech processing, image processing, and neural networks. He has published a large number of papers. He has authored a very well-known book on artificial and neural networks published by Prentisal. He has supervised 36 PhDs and a large number of master's theses. And these, his students have graduated, as I have mentioned, from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and International Institute of Information Technology, Hyderabad. He is a fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineering, fellow of Indian National Academy of Sciences, Indian Academy of Sciences. He is a fellow of IEEE and fellow of International Speech Communication Association, ISCA. In today's anniversary lecture series, he will be speaking on the missing science in artificial intelligence. Professor Yegnanarayana.
Thank you, Professor Biswas, for your kind introduction. I just want to check with you whether I'm audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And
Yes.
Can you people see my slides?
Not yet.
Not yet. I have shared it, but maybe I can.
No, probably from INSA, Dr. Chattopadhyay is controlling with her team. So it will be since.
Can you see the slides now, please?
Professor Chattopadhyay, Dr. Chattopadhyay,
Yes.
only it is being controlled from there.
No, slide sharing.
Can you log out? Can you just go out of share and share it again?
Yeah.
How about now?
Yeah.
Now,
Yes,
now,
yes.
okay. Yes.
Now, can you see?
Yes.
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 Kindly make it full screen.
Yes, I will do that. So can you see and also can you hear me, I suppose?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Then I will continue. Thank you, Professor Biswas, for the very kind and long introduction. And also thank you for inviting me to give this talk, INSA University talk. And would like to thank Professor and Professor Devan Becker for inviting me to this talk. And what I have chosen is a topic. AI is a topic which everybody wants to talk about, probably without knowing what it is. That's the problem. And in fact, why I am saying this is no two people agree on what AI should be. But it is in this background, it is surprising and amazing that both the government, industry, academia are giving so much emphasis to AI and even started curriculum giving degrees in AI without telling what is AI. That is my biggest concern here. And in fact, the students get those degrees, but you don't have a book on AI to teach. First of all. And in fact, just today morning also in the newspaper, I said they need professors, faculty in AI and so on. Where are they? You see, it is with this background, I would like to give my perception of what this subject. You may say, how am I qualified? I am not really qualified in the sense that I have done great work in AI. I have done a little bit here and there because my main area of interest is in speech processing. But I have lived through this over the last 6 decades in this and also mingled with people who are working in AI. That is probably the only qualification I may have. And also I taught this subject a couple of times at IIT and so on, about 40 years ago. But that AI has nothing to do with AI that we are talking about today. And what I would like to talk about in the next 40 minutes that I have is the following. In fact, you may go, I suppose all of you can see the slide. You want me to make it full screen or is it okay? I suppose if you can see this, that's fine. So what I would like to talk about is the terms that we use. It's so confusing. That's the problem.
Sir, sorry for intervention.
Yeah.
I mean, full screen will be better.
Okay, I will do that. I have no problem. What about now?
Excellent.
Okay, fine. So my main focus is on the use of the terminology. That is where the problem is. Otherwise, I have no complaint about AI or the technique that we use and so on. So all of us know. In fact, if we carefully think about it, although I am basically an engineer, although I started my career in science at 10 years of science, I keep asking myself, where is I in AI? Where is intelligence in? Of course, you may ask, I can also ask, I used to ask similar questions. All of us know there are a number of books on pattern recognition. I keep asking, where is pattern recognition? Also, I teach a course, long number of years on digital signal processing. If you carefully ask a question, where is signal in digital signal processing? So this is a use of terminology is a lot of confusing. And fortunately, of course, for us, but of course, it's not good for the education. The students are so nice these days, they don't ask any questions. That is where we are safe. Otherwise, if somebody asks, for example, what is science in data science? I have no answer. And what is science even in computer science? Although I'm a professor of computer science for the past 40 years, I have no great answer for that. So the use of, and also I would like to tell just to give a scope of this. You see, I don't want to confuse using your words vaguely. At least the term that I use, first of all, let me put some quotes. These are randomly chosen from various resources and so on. And you can see the different ways people talk about this AI. I'm not going to read all of them, but you can see these are probably about half a dozen of among a few hundreds that I have seen and so on, from fairly well-known established people working in AI and related fields and so on. No two explanations give the same meaning. Okay? And how do you teach a course? How do you motivate a person to work in AI? First of all, just look at the last one, which is more recently I copied from the net and so on. Artificial intelligence is a type of technology that mimics human thought, empowering machines to act on their own and to perform functions similar to human intelligence, such as ability to perceive, learn, reason, act, etc. At least I would like to be a little more clearer in my presentation. And this is what I am going to, when I said missing science in AI, I don't mean that AI should have science. All I am trying to say is there is a science component which people keep talking about it, but it's not existing in AI. The term science I use in this in the context of understanding of a natural process. Understanding a natural process. And I consider intelligence is a natural process attributed. So I would like to keep audience this in mind during my talk, because otherwise I also might be using the terms very vaguely. And I stick to the abstract that I have given. I will try to stick to the abstract I have given, and I will try to highlight some of the points I mentioned. Before that, this is just an outline of my talk. And first I would spend a couple of minutes probably just to tell what is the origin of artificial intelligence. In fact, artificial intelligence started as a science, not as engineering. Please note that. I will explain a little bit in the next slide. And the evolution of artificial intelligence over the last 6-7 decades. You see, it's very interesting to see that it started as a science and progressed at engineering and finally settled in technology. What do you mean by this? And now anything that we do with this technology, we call it AI. So it is important to understand the evolution of AI over this past. I will briefly summarize that. All of you know this, but maybe you have not heard from me. So I would like to discuss that point. And then in this evolution, what are the different aspects of engineering of AI? We can talk about science of AI, and we can talk about engineering of AI. That is what dominated over the past 5 decades. And then now it is the technology dominance. So what are the significant aspects of technology in AI that we are talking about these days? In fact, that is all pervading these days, and everybody talks about it. And they say, we keep telling people that that is the thing that everybody has to do, and so on. And if we carefully go through various topics here, you will see there is something that is missing, although they claim that it is there. That is the missing science of intelligence in the technology of AI. Currently, the AI is technology, and what is missing is not that it should be there. All I am trying to say here is, don't say that you have simulated or you have realized the intelligence of a human being in a machine. That is the point I want to make. And why is it that this science, which I am going to tell, I will tell you what I mean by science by giving some illustration, and also the reason for missing this science. It is primarily, all of you know, because you are all scientists, and it is basically the architectural mismatch. The architectural mismatch between a biological neural network and the current AI technology-based so-called deep neural network, deep learning. It is this architectural mismatch that is causing this absence of science, which it should be. There is no need for us to do science in this technology, but we should know that there is a difference here. We are not realizing intelligence in the artificial intelligence. That is all. And of course, then I will come to the conclusions. And before that, I would like to, it is very interesting what I have collected from a book, Analog VLSA book by Covered Me. The brain is more efficient by a factor of 10 million than a best digital technology that we can hope to attain. In a typical silicon implementation, we switch about 10 to the power of 4 transistors to do one operation. We pay a factor of 10 to the power of 4 for taking all the beautiful physics that is built into these transistors, mashing it down to 1 or 0, and then painfully build back with the AND and OR gates to reinvent the multiply. We then string together those multiplications and additions to get an exponential. But we neglected the basic fact that the transistor does an exponential all by itself. This, if you just project this, I'm not saying just word by word, but if you project this thought, you can see what we are doing AI and why we say that science is missing. And let us go ahead and just recall how AI started. Okay? And this is an often quoted statements here. And it was in 1956, the term AI was coined by a group of great mathematicians and led by John McCarthy. And notice what I marked in red, that is most important. Okay? AI what was the purpose of AI there is to proceed the discussion of 3 days or some days, 3-4 days workshop is to proceed on the basis of a conjecture that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence in principle can be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate. Notice what is the underlying theme of this. It is showing that can we describe, do we understand intelligence enough so that we can precisely describe all the steps there. Then only a machine comes into picture that we can simulate and show that we have understood and so on. So it has nothing to do with making a machine intelligent and so on. It is basically trying to understand what is intelligence arising from a human being and can we describe it. Now, obviously, even after seven decades, the answer is simply no. So this just gives a, so what I would like to do here is just to give you a brief evolution of AI. And AI, what I have marked here, you might have seen this several times. What I have marked here in black is about based on the architecture, that is biological neural network and our limited understanding of that and so on. Some ideas have evolved and so on from 1940s, especially starting with the Hertz law, how the learning takes place in a biological neural network and so on, and ideas of Michael-Pitts neuron and things like that. And what is marked in red is the AI part. That means some aspect of intelligence, people try to realize it in a machine. Please note the wording here. Some aspect of intelligence, try to realize it in a machine, not that they understand every aspect of intelligence and so on. And so what I'm going to talk about, this black one, this is mostly the neural simulation or realizing based on our understanding of biological neural network, the black part. And my focus is on the red part of it. That is the AI component and so on. I can break it up into several aspects. This is where the engineering part is. From 1960 onwards, the engineering part of AI, what do I mean by that? That means you take some aspect of intelligence and see whether you can realize it by a machine. It was in 60s, 50s and probably 60s. People thought that if you can do the numerical manipulation and realize a computation, why can't I manipulate symbols and realize logic out of it? That is why symbolic manipulation was considered as AI. That is the logic in 60s. Okay? And this, and then what happened is in 70s, the computers are getting slightly better. So all the if games and puzzles, especially chess and so on, they are supposed to be intelligent games and so on. So they thought that if you can demonstrate the playing of chess and so on a machine, we are realizing some component of intelligence and so on. That is the idea here. Notice that not again all intelligence and so on. And the component of intelligence is attributed to heuristic search. Heuristic search, not just brute force search, but heuristic search. But the catch there is, and also that idea was extended to what is called the speech understanding and image understanding techniques and so on and so forth. And but the idea is the AI part is attributed to the heuristic search, and who will transfer the problem or give it the problem in the form of a search problem. That's the point. Okay? So that in games and puzzles, it was very easy to look at it as a search problem. But in speech understanding and image understanding, it was a little hard. In fact, if you carefully look at it, if you go through that, the intelligent part is already done when you transform this problem to a search problem. Although AI is attributed to heuristic search and so on. And during 70s when this was going on, and people were very uncomfortable with it because all problems you cannot transform into a search problem and so on. And so they said something is missing. That is where you need some knowledge also. Knowledge is an important component of intelligence, and hence the so-called knowledge-based systems or expert systems are proposed in 80s, for example. So 80s, early 80s, 80 to 85, 86, all knowledge-based systems, expert systems, they are all considered as AI components. So notice that these are all engineering part of it. That is knowledge-based realization of that through expert systems is what was called AI. Just as heuristic search was called AI in 70s. So, and during mid 80s, of course, there is a big transformation. There are again scientists and engineers were very uncomfortable with this knowledge-based system and so on, because how do you acquire the expertise or knowledge from a human being and so on? So they thought, no, we need to go to the, again, biological understanding of the biological neural network, the structure and functioning of the biological neural network and so on. And they realized but there's some kind of a pattern processing and so on. So it was all in the mid-80s, the artificial neural networks ideas came and so on. In fact, they tried to realize certain neural network models for specific pattern recognition. Pattern is a human attribute, please note that. Specific pattern recognition task, for example, there were ANN models. Again, all these models were inspired by the structure and functioning of the biological neural network. And it is ANN models for pattern classification, ANN models for pattern storage and so on, and of course, self-organization map. So on. See, these are, and there was a specific architecture for each of these tasks in those days. See? So the idea was not really to make a computer intelligent and so on and so forth. It is only to get a satisfaction that what we as a human being do certain tasks like pattern clustering or self-organizing and so on. Can we realize this and demonstrate an emission? That was the goal there. You see, but slowly what happened in 90s, the machines were getting more powerful. So then they learned a lot of data and so on. So whatever little they were doing and using the terms like supervised, unsupervised learning in neural network, they thought that can be done in a much bigger way if you have large amount of data and so on. So slowly in 90s, mid-90s onwards, AI, the neural network component of AI is forgotten, and they introduced the word machine learning. What is machine learning? So notice that for a human being, there is no separate component like supervised learning, unsupervised learning. We do all of that together. You see, but if you have to realize it through a machine, you have to clearly define what is a supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning and so on. And that is what was called machine learning. This was in 90s. And so machine learning, notice that was also called AI winter again, in the sense that the people forgot about AI because machines were getting more powerful. A lot of data is available, and hence people turned to machine learning. And of course, AI term was really dormant or not used at all for almost 10 years, toward late of 90s to almost late 2000, first decade of 2000 until 2006 or so. But it was in 2006 and 7, then again, something the neural network part is revived, thanks to Hinton and his colleagues. The idea of deep learning came at that time. There is no deep learning that is used today, has nothing to do with the original deep learning concept that is proposed by Hinton and so on. Basically, although I don't have time to describe it, it basically combines two important components of learning, what you call the descriptive learning and discriminative learning and so on. Earlier, all these other models that were built, either they do mostly discriminative learning or some descriptive learning, but a combination of that is and so that means that is what was called deep learning. And slowly what happened is the machines became more powerful, and hence the late 2000, that is 2009 and onwards, especially starting from 2012, because of some demonstrations on a huge database and so on, the current AI ideas came up. And now all the current AI is what's called technology of the technology. What is this technology? What does it contain? This technology, all of us know this AI. It is a machine learning and deep learning and so on. This deep learning has nothing to do with the deep learning I mentioned a minute ago. It is the deep learning means it is the learning of a deep neural network. That means a large number of layers of neuron models, and then learning algorithm for that. That is what is called the deep learning. Okay? So deep is associated with the deep neural network rather than learning part of it. But that is what is commonly currently used. So we call it the deep learning through DNN, deep neural network. And so whole AI currently is revolving around. See? And some of the components of course, now there are hundreds. And just to give you an idea, in 2019 alone, there were estimated 25,000 papers on machine learning and deep learning from the United States alone. And you can imagine the next 2 years what happened. Some of the components of DNN are artificial neural networks, convolutional neural networks, recurrent neural networks, which realized through what is called the long short-term memory and so on. And of course, now there are what are called generative adversarial neural networks. And so on. These are some of the components. All this is current AI. This is all called AI. So, but what is important here is, and also everybody puts their own way of, linking these terms and so on. In fact, most of the people say AI is in fact, I will show you in the next slide, the link between AI, machine learning and deep learning as everybody views and so on. And so, but in all of this, currently in the last 10 years, and even today, we are trying to find application for this. We are not doing any great architecture anymore. We are only trying to find applications for these rather than developing architecture for an application of the problem. That's exactly what is happening. So this is what is the current perspective of AI. Everybody thinks, in fact, you can see any number of presentations where there's AI, including recent Google presentation I have seen, where AI is machine learning is a subset of AI and deep learning is a subset of machine learning and so on and so forth. From what I have discussed so far and so on, if you see, you don't know how to understand this kind of a logic that one is a subset of ML is a subset of AI, DL is a subset of ML. In fact, because of this, I have evolved my own perspective of this, because these are different perspectives of this AI, machine learning and deep learning and so on. Whether it's right or not, I don't know. That's why I have written with pen. I never, what I have shown here is there are different perspectives of AI depending on whom you are talking to or who is talking. For example, for general public who have little understanding of anything, all of them are saying AI. And in fact, everybody wants their ward to study AI, machine learning and deep learning and so on without knowing what it is. From a business and journalist point of view, AI is what I have shown in the previous slide. AI is a superset of machine learning, it is a superset of deep learning and so on. For academics and academics, they are slightly probe a little more because they are academics. They want to write papers and so on. Also, they may want to understand a little bit. So for them, this is confusing. So they think that, okay, there is some component of AI in this and some component of DL in this, but otherwise they are not completely, one is not subset of this. And they have to sell this if they want to get money. They want to say, no, this is correct and so on. And so you go to, you talk the business terms and get some money and so on. But otherwise, even academics, some serious people think, what is all this going on? If it is a serious researcher who is not bothered about money and other things and so on, and also philosophers, and for them, this is what it is. AI is nothing but a simulation of learning and intelligence, which has nothing to do with machine learning, which is a realization of algorithms, supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning with a large amount of data and so on. Deep learning is nothing but a learning mechanism for a network with a large number of parameters. Sometimes the parameters run into tons of thousands of parameters. So, and in all of these different perspectives, you notice, you see on the top here, we stopped thinking about it. That is, we stopped thinking about human learning and human intelligence anymore. We only start worrying about these terms. This is where so just to summarize the three components, science part is understanding pattern processing ability of human being. That is, and then engineering part is development of tools and techniques, which is what was addressed in the last 4 or 5 decades. And technology, the last 1 decade, is application of these tools like DNN, and these are all mostly data driven. And the deep learning, as I told you, is attributed to DNN. It has nothing to do with learning at all. And so, having said this, having given the background of the various ways of looking at AI and its evolution, why did I say that there is something? If you carefully look at it, there are many things that are missing here, which we want to attribute to human intelligence. For example, I listed a few of them for illustration. I may not be able to discuss all of them, but I will take one or two of them. Selective attention is a fantastic human ability, which we don't even know how to realize it in a machine. What do you mean by selective attention? Just look at, there are many things, of course, I can say. When you are listening to me, for example, you can't capture all the sound that I am producing. If you do, you will not get the message. If you don't understand this clearly, take the example of a newspaper reading that we do every morning. If you open the newspaper, tomorrow, if you have not done this, you start reading every word in the newspaper, you will never understand what is the message. So your ability for selective attention is the most intelligent part of the human being. We don't know how to read, and no two people do in a similar way at all. You see, and this is one of the features which a biological nut or a human being does, which a machine, in my opinion, can never be done, because there's no unique way of stating this. There's no precise description which you can realize in a machine. And this is my favorite statement to say, as a human being, we do processing first and then representation later. What do you mean by this? Just look at a poster, for example. You read something, let us say, Indian National Academy of Sciences or something like that. You don't read as the white pixels, black pixels and things like that. And so your ability to process and put it, and then represent it is a human way of doing it. You process first and then represent. Whereas in a machine, you have to represent and then find out how to process it. So there is a pattern processing ability of a human being. And for example, if you watch a TV, how is it that we are able to capture the temporal pattern at all? And we have no answer. In fact, this is the question I used to give to my students when I am talking this, teaching neural networks 40 years ago to a class of 100 people. And how do you watch a TV? How do you capture the temporal patterns and so on? Not by looking at how many frames are moving in front of you or how many pixels are there in a frame and things like that. So this is very important. So this is another feature which, again, it is only a human ability. Machines can never realize this. And also, you see, we talk so much about learning. I am amazed at the kind of abuse of this term learning. Learning, human beings never learn from examples. Please note that. We only learn from process. And of course, I don't want to elaborate on this. All of you have seen and experienced in this. So learning from process, but almost all the current models of AI learn from examples. So there is and then of course, this I don't want to go into other aspect, there is lack of time. And another very important human intelligent component is local and global interaction, you see, and which we do so effortlessly and which no machine can do it easily, because there is no unique way of doing also any of this. Because I don't want to talk about this, it will take some time. All of you may know already this so-called stability and plasticity and learning and so on. And the last point I want to emphasize, the non-uniqueness of a solution. You see, that is what human, suppose you write a character on a piece of paper and you arrange it, and second time you can never write exactly the same way. If you speak a sound, let us say even a sound like ah, yes, and record it, and you can never produce that same signal second time in your life and so on. That non-uniqueness is a feature of the biological neural network which you can never realize by a machine at all. You see, so reasons for missing these some of the so-called science components or intelligent components in AI is the following. Although I may not have, most of you being scientists, you know much better than me. There is an architectural mismatch. The structure and functioning of the biological neural network and the machine. This is, by machine I mean AI machine. I mean it is the deep neural network with deep learning and so on. So there is an architectural mismatch, and that can never be bridged. And there is the so-called power in a biological neural network comes from this dynamics, both the activation dynamics and the synaptic dynamics model. And also there are some models which are proposed, but none of them are used in the current AI techniques and so on. But there are other things which we know. And the most important thing which I strongly feel that is happening. For a human being, the intelligent component is we continuously reconfigure the biological neural network architecture. It is not that it's a static one. Whereas the technology-driven architecture is a static one. So, and just to highlight a few things, why this mismatch, a little more on mismatch. Until now, I talked about the feature of biological neural network. Let us see the so-called AI architecture, DNN, deep neural network. It had nothing to do with BNN except using a large number of parameters. These are only a few, listed a few mismatch aspects. And DNN is mostly a layered feed-forward neural network, whereas, of course, except recurring neural network. Whereas the biological neural network has no physical layers at all. You see, and it is not that as though you have a feed-forward or something like that. And then the so-called rectified linear unit, which is so popular in the current AI and the deep neural network, is not same as the hard limiting function of a biological neuron, that is the so-called perceptron model. In fact, artificial neural network field has emerged into prominence because of the understanding of the hard limiting function in the half-field models, for example. All of you know, it was half-field energy analysis and so on. That is the one that brought this neural network field very popular. And then, of course, DNN is mostly supervised learning. That is the current AI, where learning in biological neural network is mostly pattern linking and so on. And deep learning in DNN has nothing to do deep in conceptual sense. These are only a few statements I make to contrast between DNN and BNN and so on. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that it is not that one is, you have to have science in AI and so on. No. All I am saying is, we say that these are complementary tasks. That's why technology is bound to change and so are the applications. So we should learn to adapt to changes for survival. But don't call everything that we do with a technology AI as AI. We should examine the side effects of this technology. I will mention a few in the next slide. In the AI, and if you type in Google, you will get this answer for this AI and carbon emission and a effect on human development and learning ability and so on. These three words, K means knowledge, learning, and intelligence. These are human attributes. Somehow we started attaching machine learning, machine intelligence, and so on and so forth. That is where the confusion is. But if these are human attributes, it has doesn't have a similar meaning in the context of machine and so on. And as I mentioned, why it is so, because of the artificial mismatch and so on. And I have already mentioned, and it is very important to understand, especially for teachers. I have seen it is the students learn from process, not from product. Okay? And of course, the last statement I don't have time to discuss. All of you know already. Human activity, the pattern processing in a very, very large dimensional space, not in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dimensional space and so on. So what is the take-home message of this talk? It is a biological neural network and machines are two separate systems with complementary roles. True learning takes place when there is uncertainty, not precision, as in handwriting and extempore speech and so on. And although this is you should take it to the proper spirit. In my opinion, human learning intelligence involves, if you say a word is 1,000 pictures, that means if you can imagine 1,000 pictures with 1 or 2 words, whereas in a machine intelligence, the picture is 1,000 words. Just to quote, before I conclude, the quote from Claude E. Shannon, all of you may know, father of information theory in communication engineering. Efficient, this he stated about 30, 40 years ago. And efficient machines for such purposes as pattern recognition, language translation, and so on, may require a different type of a computer than any we have today. It's my feeling that this will be a computer whose natural operation is in terms of patterns, concepts, and vague similarities rather than sequential operations on 10-digit numbers. Claude E. Shannon. I copied this from Dreyfus' book. I didn't know the original source where he said. But Dreyfus has written a book in 1994, What Computers Still Cannot Do. because he wrote a book in 1974, What Computers Cannot Do. And after 20 years, he wrote a book, What Computers Still Cannot Do. And it's very interesting reading and also comment on artificial intelligence. And just in the last 2-3 weeks, I have read a few articles and I thought I will, some of the recent alerts on AI. AI had the potential to weaken people's capacity to make ordinary judgment. Atrophying imagination, deepfake technology using GANs, generative adversarial networks and so on, may gradually destabilize the very idea of historical events and so on. And AI systems will push the pace of combat to a point where machine and action surpass the cognitive and physical abilities of human decision makers to control or even comprehend events. This is from a military journal from USA and so on. And then these last 3 are the points I made. And by emphasizing I in AI, we are trying to, that means we are saying AI has I, that's what I mean. Then we are trying to attribute science to technology, whereas we should be exploiting the technology to understand science and so on. And another more recent last 5 years activity that is going on is we do something with a machine called AI, and we are trying to say explainable AI. How can we explain AI? We don't even know what is going on here. Just, a trained supervised learning model at various stages cannot be explained. The way it does is totally different. It's a black box, you see. And because then we can talk any length of time about learning abilities in AI, because I've been teaching for the past 56 years now. And I have seen the changes that is happening. And students' ability to learn is a lot less now than what it was before, although they are much smarter now than what it was. So the whole of my talk is based on a more recent IEEE Spectrum Specialist October 2021, Deep Learning Diminishing Returns. That whole issue was on AI and the turbulent past and uncertain future of AI. So this is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
We are really thankful to have Professor Yegnanarayana for with us for delivering a wonderful anniversary lecture of INSA. And we can find that there are striking similarities in both the lectures of today afternoon. Both the speakers emphatically highlighted the role of basic science and scientific temper, although in a different context. Now I would like to request Professor Saha, President Professor Saha and Vice President Professor Kakkar to make their comments, interact with the speaker, and then probably, if time permits, we'll start a short discussion. To start with, Professor Shankar Pal is requested to open the comments. So first, President and Vice President, followed by Professor Shankar Pal.
Thank you, Professor Yegnanarayana, for giving such a illuminating lecture, and at least it was an eye opener. As far as I am concerned, many of my misconceptions are removed, and it was great to hear you. And thank you very much for coming to the anniversary meeting to give the lecture. I request Professor Kakkar to give his comments.
Thank you, Professor Yegnanarayana. It's wonderful to hear you again. As usual, absolutely clear, almost like a tutorial for us. I completely agree with most of the things you're saying. Whenever people talk about machine learning, I'm always reminded about the old engineering approach that we used for so many years, where we have a lot of data and then we'll get a nice correlation based on dimensionless numbers, like the famous friction factor plots for fluid mechanics and so forth. And so this looks like the next version of that, where you have a lot of data and you fit a complex function to it. So thank you. And I think that your lecture is certainly a cautionary tale for those who want to jump into this area.
Thank you.
So we can start our interaction session with all the viewers, all the participants. Maybe I may request Professor Shankar Pal to have opening remarks.
Well, it's nice because we have been working for so many decades in these areas, particularly pattern recognition since 1970s. And then that time he was at IIC, Bangalore, speech. Now, this, whatever he told, most of the things, not everything, I have been also telling during the last 4 to 5 years, during convocation speech, keynote speech. Tomorrow also I'll be giving a talk at Istanbul, keynote speech, here also mentioning the fact that I see that when we started neural networks in middle 80s, when it is revived again, we had an impression, understanding, that's why as follows, that it will try to emulate biological neural systems, that is biological neural networks and the information representation scheme in human brain, and obviously the cognitive system. Then after a few years, we realized that it's not that so easy because we made the complicated problem very simple in terms of some networking. But then what we do? We have realized that and also accepted the artificial neural network, for example, is a tool that has certain characteristics which any design engineer would love to have in his or her system. For example, those characteristics like robustness, ruggedness, that means even if you cut off, delink one node or neuron, it still functions just like human brain. It doesn't die off suddenly if you get hurt. It's a graceful degradation. So speed, so optimality, speed, massive parallelism, and those robustness, ruggedness, these are the characteristics which any design engineer would love to have in his or her system. That's why it became popular. But at the same time, as you mentioned, that we have not developed the theory, mathematical background. We have not developed much new architecture, except a few like Fukushima's handwritten character model or adaptive resonance theory of Grossberg and otherwise. But people accepted that it is a particularly fit for a neural network, multi-layer perceptron. It is just ready-made, available in the market. You buy it and then use for any kind of tool. And that's how they published paper. They got funding also. But the subject, the science component, as you mentioned, that the logic, just like the how human being perceives a pattern, that concept was completely lagging. That is also not also missing in our just pattern recognition theory also. That's why pattern recognition has evolved to expert system, knowledge-based system, just to trying to make more information-based system, knowledge-based system, the way any experts like medical doctors or law interpreters take the decision. So anywhere, as you mentioned, that in whole computer science, in that way, you should see that science is less as compared to our physics, biology, or even just chemistry. When I was at Imperial College studying, that time computer science was evolving just in 79, 80s. My advisor, Bob King, he used to always joke, Shankar, computer scientists are third grade scientists. There is no science. So I still remember that word because we have gone through that called physics. So physics, when you study, for everything we understand the mathematics and the mechanism and the theory, etc. But in this case of artificial intelligence, the way it is now going developed, that's why I'm telling in my all lectures as a caution. And also I published a review article in Applied Intelligence Journal because they have crossed 30 years of anniversary. They have invited me to write a review article. And here we mentioned in the last section the similar things in some different way. See, you have to if you understand deep network, deep learning, you have to understand machine learning. If you want to understand machine learning, you have to understand artificial neural networks. If you want to understand artificial neural network, you have to understand pattern recognition. So unless you know pattern recognition, and you jump to deep learning, then it will be like a just even deep learning neural network is just black box architecture. So deep learning will be even more black box. So again, now when I see the results, students, everything, they are getting job. But then I tell them everything the same way in some different forms. That if you want to understand deep learning, this is a new concept. You have to understand machine learning. Forget about science. Even those architecture, if you want to understand the architecture, how it functions, you have to understand the basic pattern recognition theory. Otherwise, those architecture you cannot. Otherwise, it's like a just filter you use. Some railway operation, pulling operation, and then get some funding. There is no science. That's what we have been asking always. But again, no science is also a science. Heuristic is just also a science. In case of heuristics also, if you see that, we can go by some logic. So the logic has to have some established fact. Anyway, so this discussion will be now continuing as long as one, but one thing for our young generation researchers, that's what I've been telling, that if you want to do deep learning, machine learning, because this will continue for another 7 to 8 years, let me tell you here. Because neural network died after 10 to 12 years. All journals of neural networks, they were publishing something else. Funding stopped, everything. If you see that again, after 10 years, it came your big data. So big data problem we could not solve. Again, after 10 years, we are now talking about data size. It's basically Americans. They bring new technology every year, and we are all running. And these are required because of this data that we get. Genome Project, WWW, that has created all those issues. But again, unless you have good size, you cannot have good technology. So no good science, no good technology. That's my message to all young researchers who are joining everywhere for data analysis. But again, it has a very good job market. And India also, government of India is now spending on huge money, being AI center, data sets, AI center, etc. And I'm not sure how long would they continue. Again, I think 7 to 8 years, they will realize that, but my wish is that since machine learning means learning from previous experience, so our previous experience in 1980s regarding artificial neural network, the way we lost its interest, I hope from that learning, we again will learn and we'll see that will not recur in case of deep learning. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Professor Pal. Probably, Professor Yegnanarayan can take up the questions all together. There is a comment from Professor Sangwan, wonderful lecture, Professor Madhu Dikshit, and Professor Shivani. So if you want to ask any questions specifically to Professor Yegnanarayan, please come forward. Otherwise, I would request Professor Yegnanarayan to, draw a logical conclusion on the comments. Professor Dikshit and Professor Sangwan. Then Professor Shivani. So they have written comments on chat box that they are very excited with the lecture, and it's a wonderful lecture. So Professor Yegnanarayan, I'd like to request you to make the concluding remarks of the
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Shankar Paul, for a nice comments. I think the message, of course, this time is too short to convey the message clearly, but it is not that one is bad or the other. It's just the way to understand this. You see, what we are basically saying is, yes, AI is a great thing that we are doing and so on, but don't call it as intelligent. That is all the point. You see, so because the intelligent is attributed to human being, and there is no comparison between these two, and they are complementary rather than competing roles and so on. I think this way, these wild extrapolations of current learning is a little dangerous, you see, and saying that, okay, we can do this and replace human being and human tasks and things so like that. I think these are all very rash statements to make, you see. At least as a scientist, we should be much more cautious, and which we are most of the time, you see. And also the blurring of, you see, if I am teaching electromagnetics, for example, which I taught 50 years ago, we start with the very clear ideas of what is Coulomb's law and go all the way up to Maxwell's equations and things like that. But here, if you want to start a course on AI, where do you begin? How do you explain to the students what is AI? That is the problem we are facing. That's okay. I think still the tools are very important. They should learn, but they should also know that there is a science component of this, of intelligence, which is very separate from this. That is all the point I am trying to make here. Otherwise, there is nothing like one is superior to the other, or one is bad and another is good, and so on. There is no such thing at all. See? So it is everything as a, but the only thing is, let us not say whatever we are doing with the technology is AI. That is the conclusion I want to give. Thank you very much for the opportunity that is given to me.
I think it's the time to draw a conclusion about this session. I mean, two wonderful lectures we had, and we could understand difference between innovation and invention, which is very critical understanding today afternoon, and many various other things. So I would like to thank all the participants and close this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Biswas, for conducting the session so well, and thanks to all the speakers as well. This concludes the session, and I invite you to the next session, which starts at 4 o'clock, which is the medal lecture.